a proud member of the RCI. So before I actually share my experience about being gay in the Catholic Church, I'd like to just tell you about how I came to this group and why. So a couple of months ago, I was just looking online to find like-minded people that I could interact with and have a discourse with in the Catholic sphere. And that's when I stumbled upon RCI, and the first ever, because I had this experience of complete exposure and awareness when I was abroad recently, studying and working in New York and Boston. And I realized that there wasn't any such thing in India, at least up until 5 years ago. And so I was determined to find something similar when I returned to Mumbai recently. And I'm thankful that I found this group that was founded in 2018. And to Virginia, to Rachel, to Andy, to so many of the members, Ava, who joined us more newly, that the work that is being done is really making strides, and it's only going forward from here. So thank you once again. And going back to my experience of being abroad, that's more what fortified me to be able to speak in front of all of you today. This is the first time I'm doing something like this. So it is a lot of courage on all of our parts, but it's definitely a safe space, and I'm only doing it because all of you have made it so. So my experience abroad was such that I was part of a LGBT group at my parish, which was all welcoming. And also on campus at my university, we had LGBT alliance groups. And the experience was like none other, because I never had any such thing in India. And I got myself fully immersed into it. We used to have sessions. We had a task force that was working for equal rights of the LGBT persons, both in and outside the Catholic faith. And one such incident that I wanted to share with all of you today, because I want to say it really opened my eyes to the reality of this movement, not just in India, but the world over. So there was this group called Courage International, which I'm not sure if any of you have heard of it, but it's an apostolate of the Roman Catholic Church. And the priest that was heading this program came down to our church in Syracuse, New York, upon invitation to defend his stance about LGBT persons wanting to be in the church and not being able to basically be who they are. So it's a conversion therapy that they follow. And there's a step process, quite like AA or NA for that matter. And they put you through it, and it's rigorous. And being a journalist by profession, I decided to pursue this as a story. So I got various perspectives into it, and I had to be as objective as possible, which was really hard. But when that priest was standing on the podium that day, trying to defend himself, saying that courage is what all of you should practice if you're LGBT and want to stay in the church, because this is what scripture says. And the basic tenet of what he was saying is that if you are attracted to the same sex or in a relationship with somebody of the same sex, you must be celibate, you must be best friends with that person. And that's it. And then you can come to church freely with no guilt in your heart or on your mind whatsoever. And so I wrote out the story, and I was a little confused or conflicted about where I was standing with regards to this matter and me being a practicing Catholic. But the one thing that strengthened my resolve when it came to standing by the people who are like me was when my parish priest of that church in New York stood up, faced the priest that was speaking, and he said, "Shouldn't scripture adapt with times and with its people?" And that has stuck with me throughout. And I think that's the foundation that every religion should follow, that we have to adapt with scripture, with time, and with our people, because we are all one body in the church in Christ. So there was a session that followed this, which was basically, why do I stay in the Catholic Church if I'm gay? And I'll tell you why I stay in the Catholic Church. Because this is my right and this is where I belong, and no one can tell me otherwise. And this, I have to say, has been easier for me because of the support that I have in my parents, which are two of the most important people in my life, and then my friends, close family, and people like all of you today. So I have to say that it is not easy for a lot of people out there. People I know personally have to really fight the battle every single day. But I think it's only when we stand together that we can make that difference and make it easier for the person who's going through it. Because the struggle is not anyone else's but your own. And together, it becomes one struggle. So for me, I stay because I've grown up in the Catholic faith and because I've known so much of a strength in the community, in the family that the church has given me. And I have this peace within that I will not forego for anything. So this goes back to 2015 when I came out. And I knew that I had to do it in such a methodical manner with my points listed down and the science to back me up. I had presented to my parents in the best manner possible. And I said, I don't care if anybody else knows, but I'm telling my parents first, and then I'm going to move forward from this. And so I did it. There was an initial hiccup, which we got over. But since then, I think it has been such a journey of acceptance, growth, evolution, and the fact that my dad said, we will get through this together as a family. And that was all I needed, honestly. There was nothing else that I needed. And that's what made me understand that that's the role that the church should play in an individual's life like myself, or like all of you, because we are all one family and nothing less. And since then, it has been such a journey, like a reel unfurling every single day when you meet somebody and you come out again and you come out again and you keep doing it and it doesn't stop. But it's such a feeling of liberation. It should not be a feeling of being stifled. Freedom is so important to all of us. And to people like us, it's, I would say, tenfold, especially with the scenario that we live in right now. So I think the revelation for me that I have such a backing and I can do this and I can help people who don't have it as easy was last year when I was engaged to be married in Boston. And I didn't know if I was doing the right thing or not. So I was talking to a couple. First and foremost, I spoke to my parents and they gave me their full acceptance. Step one was done. Then I spoke to my Roman Catholic priest friends in New York. And I have somebody who's very close to me. And he said, I would like to be there to bless the marriage. And I remember sitting and crying. I used to go and pray to Mother Mary every day. And I was weeping because I said, I must be doing something right. And there was a woman from the Roman Catholics Women's Priest Group in North America, RCWG. And she wanted to come down to bless the union. And she was a close friend of my partner. And that again said, okay, this is like a sign from above that I can go ahead. And I think that is what I envision for everybody here today, those who want to do it. But even if not marriage, it's just to be who you are and come to church and be accepted. That's all that we're asking. So I think I found a perfect summation to this sharing today in a mass that I was attending online a couple of weeks ago, because everything is virtual, obviously. So I was sitting and listening to the sermon, and there was a passage from Ephesians chapter 5. And to interpret in my words and share it with you today is basically this. It's that no man has ever hated himself or his body that much that he would bring himself harm. So none of us, if we are one body in Christ, in the church, should bring each other harm. It's only in the nourishment and the care of ourselves and our brothers and sisters that we can come to church to tomorrow together and say that we are Catholics practicing in our faith and be proud of that. So that is all I wanted to share with all of you today. And I thank you so much for all those who have attended, for all those who share in our story, and for the Rainbow Catholics India group, which is definitely here to stay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Lyle, for that very, very personal sharing. Thank you so much for having the courage to share it with us. It's such a great story. We are so proud of you. I now invite Rachel, who says she was a homophobe at one time, but got converted. So I asked Rachel to share her story. And probably it is the story of many of us. So we need to listen to such a story. Rachel?
Hi, thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I'm Rachel Alfonso. I'm currently a student, and I'm also pursuing a diploma course in theology. Well, I grew up in a conservative Catholic household. So, the masses, the rosaries, the rituals, we were part of the renewal. So you can imagine all the praise the Lord and hallelujahs happened everywhere and every moment. And while I respect spirituality in its own place, unfortunately, the way that they interpreted spirituality was that it conflicted with a lot of issues we deal with in daily life. So not only was I very familiar with the one-sided interpretation of the Bible, I was involved with the renewal, and I was very judgmental. I believed that the LGBT community is completely wrong. They're making a choice. They are going against God and what God ordained as natural and so on. I was doing my master's degree, and during that time, I was introduced to statistics. So I started applying statistics and the scientific method to pretty much anything I believed in, because it was fun. But over time, I started also applying those beliefs to some of the things, some of those methods to some of the things we believed. And one of the most important arguments against homosexuality is that it is unnatural as such. That was the biggest argument. And then I looked at myself. I wear glasses. I've had 2 surgeries in my life. I have taken antibiotics. Which of these things are natural? So the argument about natural and unnatural fell flat over there. Of course, I asked questions to a lot of people at a later stage. Suren, Virginia, I bombarded them with questions over time. But mainly it was for me to start accepting and realizing where I was wrong. So anyway, I started questioning myself. Why did I believe certain things? Because the so-called Bible said so. And I went back to Leviticus, read that passage where, the famous passage which is against homosexual. At that time, I did not know that it was a misinterpretation. So I took those words as it is. And also following those words where it seems to appear to challenge homosexuality, the next paragraph talks about how those people who follow God should not eat pork, and I love pork. It also spoke about how we should not wear blended fabrics, and I was wearing a cotton polyester blend. Also, many of those rules in the Old Testament, where lepers are supposed to be out of the community, and the rules about women and their periods and they're unclean and all that. And suddenly I realized if God created women and God created leprosy and then why are these rules rejecting certain people who are coming down with these very so-called natural, are in these natural phases in their lives? And then I realized there was a problem in how we were interpreting the Bible. The misinterpretation, of course, it's a completely different issue about the misinterpretation which came out later in the 1950s, but I won't go into that. I will go into what I started questioning. I looked at a heterosexual marriage, and I could see the amount of, the communication, the lack of communication, the violence that happens, too much of domestic violence. And I realized how we as Christians did not give much importance to that. We were so fixated about, homosexuality is wrong, and we were so busy condemning a group of people who were very peaceful. And we were not giving enough attention to some real issues that we as Christians should have been bothered about. And that made me realize homophobia, the hatred I had for homosexual people, was bigoted and wrong on my part, and it did not reflect justice in any way. Finally, what two people did in their bedroom was none of my business, as long as they're not hurting anyone. I think our priority should not be whether a man loves another man or whether he loves a woman, but I think the priority should be whether the partners are consensual. That is where our focus should be, not who and where and how. Besides, as a Christian, I think my focus should be more on the issues of violence, on poverty, on climate change. These are real issues that are affecting us. Besides, I can't deny that some of my favorite musicians, Elton John, Freddie Mercury, these people and so many others have contributed so much to the world around us. I mean, there might be so many who are scientists, and I do not know them because they were afraid to come out to a world which I had contributed to hatred instead of love. So now my belief is this: a person can be who they want to be. That is their choice, and it's between them and their God. Who am I to judge? As Pope Francis said, our commandment, the commandment we have received as Christians, is to love one another, love people, love and accept. And that is what I am here to do. I have to admit, I do get angry with other people like me, who are still homophobic, because I think if I challenged myself and I came to this understanding, why can't others do the same? But I think I have to also understand that each person comes to this understanding at their own time. So I'm beginning to be more patient. But that's my story. And if you have questions, so those of you who if there are you or your parents who have hated homosexuals or been angry and so on, I completely understand because I was there. But I also know it's a difficult journey to come out there, and I think it will happen if we have more of these interactions, communications, and stories of people to move us, and if we act in the spirit of love. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for sharing your experience of moving from homophobe to ally of the LGBT community. I now invite Ava to share your experience.
Hi, I'm Eva. I'm 24 years old. I'm a student and a queer YouTuber and writer, a dog and cat mom. I'm pansexual and a non-binary woman. So I wasn't always a Catholic or a Christian or even a theist in the past, but there was something that always drew me towards Catholicism, because when I was growing up, I had a very different view of it, of love and openness and the other things that we speak about here. But when I grew up, I got to know about the homophobia and that it's a sin, and I was just figuring out my sexuality, and I was scared, and I was depressed, and my best friend, who was a Christian, said I should like turn to God, and I found some comfort in it. And I ended up coming out to that friend, and she was the first person I came out to, and she was very accepting, and she believed that God loved everybody and stuff. So I got a lot of ideas from her. But then she got influenced when she got older, and she would sometimes say that she was worried what God would think, that she was the one who accepted me and stuff. But then that prompted me to do my research, and I learned about how it was a misinterpretation and everything. And I sent her the links and everything, and she became progressive. But at the same time, I saw how the church abroad and stuff, and even in India, treats queer people and trans people. And I became like a vehement atheist, and I was anti-religion because of how they were treated, how we were treated. And I've struggled with mental health issues that led to some suicide attempts, which brought me back into the faith. I started going to Mount Mary, and I started reading more about progressive Christianity and about how Jesus is more about radical love and life in abundance and stuff like that. And the Archbishop of Mumbai, if I'm not wrong, was sort of accepting of queer people, and that gave me some hope as well. But then I shifted to a homophobic diocese in Pune, and so I haven't actually been to church in Pune. I do have a church which I attend Zoom meetings of sometimes, which is accepting, but it's not Catholic. It's non-denominational, and I googled LGBT Catholic support in India, and I came across Rainbow Catholics, and so I uh, contacted Rachel, and she said she would call me, but then we both lost touch for several months, and then I found them on Instagram, and I contacted Rachel again, and this time she called me, and then she added me to the group, and I came to like one or two meetings, and I absolutely loved the vibe of this group, like the acceptance, the progressiveness, the desire for change, and absolutely loved it. One story that I have is of a Catholic teacher that I had when I was in school. On her first day, she came and started calling the guys fairies and then explained that it meant gay. And she would say stuff like God didn't want it and everything, and talk about like hypnotherapy. And she said that um, it was not a choice, that it was innate and nobody could choose it, but it was still unnatural and wrong. And she had some other extreme views as well that she imparted on the children. And my best friend became influenced by that. She One day there was this girl who didn't know what a lesbian was. So I was explaining her, and then that girl, my best friend, came and explained to her what it means. And after she was done, she added that it was unnatural and that you should do hypnotherapies and stuff the way the teacher says. And I was really, really hurt and shattered because I had really looked up to my friend and I really like cared about her and I had come out to her, so it wasn't like she didn't know. I was really hurt by this. And my point is that I have found comfort in my faith in times when I have not found comfort in anything else. I have faced a lot of hardship, and God is the only constant who's been with me and been true to me through all of that. I am disabled, queer, trans, mentally ill, and God loves me. He made me in His image exactly as I'm supposed to be. So I will not accept anyone else tarnishing my faith and telling me that my God doesn't love me the way I am, because I know that He does. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
Ava has a lovely t-shirt and she wants you to read the message on that t-shirt. Why be racist, sexist, homophobic, or transphobic when you could just be quiet? So if you do not have anything nice to say, please be quiet. But after listening to her story, please try to love everybody. God has created everyone, accept them as they are. Thank you, Ava. Thank you so much for telling us your precious life story. I now invite our next speaker, Andy, to speak.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Andy Silvera. I'm an assistant professor at the Goa Institute of Management in Goa. And when I grew up in Goa, as a young boy, there were moments when I was beginning to find myself, to discover who I am as a person. And as I first began to have my thoughts of and feelings of attractions towards others, I remember quite in school, a friend of mine giving me a book. It was a small little pocket book of the kind of questions that, young Christians kind of have as youth. And the first page that I went on to was a chapter on sexuality. And it was incidental also that they said that perhaps for a lot of you would have happened to come to this chapter first. So as I was reading that, I began to realize that talking about our faith, especially when it comes to Christianity and the way it talks about, there was this chapter on homosexuality, and I began to realize that having any conversation on homosexuality was almost anathema. It was just something that one wouldn't want to do. And that also kind of made me close up to any exploration outside within what was there in my mind. And yet, as I was going about with my everyday life, I was beginning to sense my greater attraction first to my teacher, then my other feelings with other boys, although it was just something that was within me. So as I grew up, I realized that I knew very clearly that I would not want to get married to a woman. That was something that I was very certain about. And when I was weighing my options, because this was way long ago when we didn't even have words like gay available to us, So I thought that the best way to live my life was to join the priesthood and live in the company of men. And I thought that that was something that was wonderful in itself. And that's how I happened eventually to join the Society of Jesus. And while I was in the order, I think I lived my life to the best way possible, in the best and truest way possible. Even though I knew that I was attracted to men, I said, my vow, my vocation was that I have to be honest to myself, and irrespective of whether I'm attracted to men or women, in the order, I take the vow of chastity. And God has made me perfect the way He did. So it so happened that we were three of us in the family. My younger sister once, when I happened to come home while I was doing my philosophy. So one day I happened to come home just for a very short time. It was my younger sister who said that she wanted to share something with me. And I said, go ahead, Nancy, tell me what you want to say. And she said that she never wanted to get married. Now, at that time, Nancy was just 20. And when she uttered those words, I kind of knew exactly what she was trying to articulate. So there are certain things within the family that we know about each other, but yet we do not want to say it. So when Nancy was saying that she did not want to get married, I kind of knew that she was not really interested in men. And at that point in time, I myself, though I knew that at one level that I was attracted to men, I was saying to myself, I have chosen a way of life. I have chosen a way of life where my questions of my choice would not be questioned. And here I felt it was my own sister who's trying to, at that point in time, I was not very open to having this conversation. So it was my own sister who was saying that she did not want to get married. And I was really confused at that moment while having this conversation. And I said, Nancy, you have a long way to go. You're just 20. No one is asking you to get any time married soon. And with that, the conversation kind of got deferred. And about 4 months later, when I came back to Goa, and again, I was having a conversation with her, my sister told me of how she was feeling really depressed. And it was more because she was in love with somebody, a nun, and the nun had stopped talking to her. And because of that, I think that for her at that point in time, that relationship meant a lot. So in those moments of feeling uncomfortable with herself, even though she was a very good swimmer, she tied a bag of stones to her body and breathed the river into her. And what happened was she had left a diary. And when she left that diary, there were so many pages. It was like literally, she was pouring out her heart. She was talking about, her feelings of confusion, of attraction. She was talking about the faith, how she was feeling mixed up in terms of how, what the church expected her to be and what her feelings were as a person. And also she had torn a lot of pages away because she probably knew that she was leaving these behind. And that reading those pages, especially in terms of how the Catholic faith kind of had such an impact in terms of her way of thinking and the kind of guilt that she carried, just in terms of her thoughts of what she was feeling, was something that was such an eye-opener for me, that even though when I was in the order, I had never thought that I would ever see myself outside it. But then that moment in her life, in our lives, actually made me think. I said, what is it that the church has bequeathed to us? And I said, one thing is definitely that it has given us a lot of guilt. And for me, that was something that was like a weight on me. And I was thinking a lot about a lot of questions. I was asking myself, even if I were to be a priest, what is it that I would really want to do? I felt that I would want to be working among lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer people. And I said, I don't think that would be possible, because at that point in time, I didn't really see it possible within the church. And I said, if I have one life to live, it has to be something where, I am part of an institution. I'm speaking from a space which is inclusive of as many people rather than exclusive. And I think that was what also made me leave the order, because I first felt it was necessary for me to be true to myself. And to be true to myself, I had to speak up for what I believed in. And that's how my journey evolved. Thankfully, over the years of leaving, it took so much more time to actually get rid of all the negativity that, somehow certain aspects of our faith kind of bring us, kind of instill in us, to be open to ourselves, to be open to our feelings of attraction, to sexuality, to understand that the sacredness of life, that, every life is sacred and that we have to honor it. And it first starts with understanding that I have to be true to myself. For me, that is what Christianity is all about, of being honest to oneself and understanding that, the temple of the Holy Spirit resides in each one of us, including me, and how I have to respect that. Thankfully, over these years of being involved in different spaces, in different movements, I've seen so much of change. I've seen so much of openness, whether working in the corporate space or now in the educational space. I see that some of these conversations are happening and flourishing with a lot of openness. And that gives me a lot of hope that, there are so many more advocates speaking up for us. But I really feel that when it comes to the church, we have a long way to go. And thankfully, a space like this, and there are many others who are making this possible even within the Catholic Church. I'm grateful to be in a relationship with a wonderful person, your Roshan. And one of the things that we do as a couple over here, or at least we strive to do, is through our engagements, whether it's even through our research that we do, we are trying to share stories of how, the church impacts LGBT people. so we also have conversations, sometimes even thankfully with the parish priest here, who's quite open to listening to some of these stories. So we're just hoping that slowly, just by having these conversations, we can create these spaces of openness, that, that even our love has as much a right as any other kinds of love to be expressed, to be blessed, to be honored within the space of the church. I don't know whether that will be possible. I'm sure it will be possible at some time, but I also feel we have a lot of work to be done as well to make that happen. So with that, thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Andy, for sharing your personal story. As Suren said, it brought tears to his eyes, and I'm sure to many, many of us. And I think we should all remember the many tears that some of our painful remarks could be bringing to the eyes of so many LGBT plus persons. And let us change. Let us now listen to, I welcome our guest speaker, Dr. Diane Teresa Veloso, who is Associate Professor and the Master of Health Social Science Coordinator of the Behavioral Science Department at Salle University in Manila, Philippines. She has a PhD in sociology. She is also coordinator of gender and multiculturalism in the College of Liberal Arts. She has conducted research on the life histories and issues of women formerly on death row in the Philippines, and the re-entry experience and challenges of formerly incarcerated women in Chicago, Illinois. She was a consultant in a nationwide evaluation of the intervention and rehabilitation programs for children in conflict with the law in the Philippines, and conducted research on gender-based violence among internally displaced people from Zamboanga city and the Islamic city of Marawi. Welcome, Diana. Thank you so much for joining us all the way from the Philippines, even though it is late for you. Diana?
Okay. Thank you, Virginia. Let me share my screen. Hold on. Okay. So good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me over. So I'll just be sharing some basic concepts on the social construction of gender, sexuality, and gender identity, just so we can see how, like issues relating to gender and sexuality are viewed from a social scientific lens. And, like it's important to always begin with how we use certain key terms with regard to the social construction of gender, also to clarify any misperceptions. So sex is all about the biological distinction between masculinity and femininity. And with that being said, there are also challenges that are posed by people who are born with ambiguous genitalia or intersex people, and they make up 2% of the population, give or take. And sex definitely pertains to biological features that relate to people's chromosomes, gonads, and genitalia. So it's all about one's anatomical features that determine whether one is male, female, and intersex. And gender is all about the social and cultural significance that we attach to biological differences of sex. And it also pertains to the identity and statuses that we ascribe to women and men based on social cultural distinctions. And, like while people tend to think that gender is something fixed, in reality, it's sex that is, sex is anatomical, but it's the meanings or stereotypes that people attach to biological sex differences that lead to the way identities and statuses ascribed to women and men are imposed based on social cultural distinctions, how people view femininity and masculinity. So as a result, gender divisions and their accompanying norms and expectations are part of major social institutions. And this is also intertwined with how we view sexuality or sexual orientation. With gender being a social status, legal designation, or personal identity, it is very central to people's identity as women or girls or as men or boys. And intertwined with this is how we view sexual orientation. the dominant cultural norms surrounding sexual orientation also influence how we see gender norms and, like gender related behaviors and trends. In any case, gender definitely matters in the sense of influencing everything from people's opportunities and life chances and how they're also treated across different social institutions. Where sexual orientation comes into play, or sexuality, simply put, it's about the categories of people that one is attracted to, and it's also very complex because it also involves how people classify themselves sexually. So we have to give people the freedom to claim whatever identity or identities they embrace for themselves, in terms of their identities and activities as sexual beings. And on that note, there are multiple sexual orientations to speak of, be it heterosexuality, homosexuality, lesbianism, bisexuality, omnisexuality or pansexuality, asexuality, and so on. Sexual orientation is also very complex because it involves everything from desire, emotional involvement, and fantasy. And like for some people, these three areas could be aligned. For others, you know what I mean? Like who you're emotionally involved with might be very different from whom you fantasize or desire. And it's just because people are different, it's part of being human. And sexual orientation is also very different from sexual behavior. I think this is similar to some of the things that people touched on a while ago. How people identify sexually may be inconsistent with how they behave sexually. So, like it doesn't mean that like if you identify with any sexual orientation, you act on it. But if you act on it, it's also your business. Like people make choices. And also, like, if you think about sex, that's the thing. Like, even how we look at gender and sexuality is also tied in with the way we see sex. So in the Western world, Western culture has a very binary classification, that of male and female. But, from another perspective, there are actually alternative classifications. Like in Indian culture, right, what's recognized is there are more than two sexes. So let's say someone is castrated, they're eunuch, then that's a different category for sex. And from a chromosomal perspective, Anne Foster Sterling found that we actually have 5 sexes, including that of intersex people or people who are born with ambiguous genitalia, because there's no one size fits all model to being intersex. Even in the intersex community, there's also diversity. And one of the things to also clarify with respect to how the LGBTQ plus communities portrayed is, like at least here in the Philippines, I can speak on behalf of Philippine society, people tend to sometimes use the label third sex, quote unquote, to refer to the LGBTQ plus community. But then this mindset assumes that they're anatomically different. At the same time, referring to intersex people as the third sex assumes there's a hierarchy of sexes, where men are presumed to be the first sex, women the second sex, and so on. So I often tell my students, don't use the term third sex when I teach gender and multiculturalism. We have all these assumptions that are unchecked that determine and influence how we see sex, gender, and sexuality. The first assumption is that biology is destiny. It pertains to the notion that nature, what one is anatomically born with, determines their social behavior, where gender comes into play, and sexual choice, where sexuality comes into play. And it's also very important to examine the unchecked assumption of heteronormativity, which pertains to the cultural and social practice of upholding heterosexuality as the norm, in the sense that, people presume everyone is heterosexual unless they disclose otherwise. And in a lot of ways, this leads to the unfair stereotyping of members of the LGBTQ plus community, in the sense that people presume if one comes out as anything but heterosexual, something happened along the way, to make them this way, instead of realizing that one's sexuality, regardless of whether they identify as heterosexual or part of the LGBTQ plus community, is simply who they are. Being lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and so on, is as natural as being heterosexual. So it's very important to reevaluate the belief that one's biological sex determines their sexual and social identity, their needs and desires, and sexual potentials, because this is often used against the LGBTQ plus community. For instance, stereotypes where people would presume you're with someone of the same gender, but in the end you look for someone of the opposite gender. Like it's an example of entrenched homophobia. Another traditional assumption is that there are only two sexes, male and female, and it reinforces the notion that male infants will become boys and men, and female infants will become girls and women. And this is framed as a normal, quote unquote, and natural course of development, as dictated by one's hormones and gonads and so on. And this also leads to the third traditional assumption that the two-sex order is supposedly a universal trend and a fact of nature. So this reinforces the notion that any deviations from the natural order, quote unquote, are mistakes of nature or of culture. This mindset is also used to exclude the intersex community and also other members of the LGBTQ plus community, other orientations, because people presume that when one is involved with, or you know what I mean, like attracted to a member of the same gender, people presume that they deviate from the so-called two-sex order that's supposedly part of nature. It's also important to look into gender identity as part of the discussion on sexuality, because aside from gender pertaining to our identities and the meanings and expectations and behaviors we attach to femininity and masculinity, we also all have a gender identity which pertains to our internal sense of self as a woman, as a man, or another gender. And one's gender identity may or may not be based on their biological sex category. So we live in a society that does not only reinforce heteronormativity, but also a preoccupation and bias in favor of cisgender identity, which pertains to someone who is comfortable with their assigned gender. Their biological sex is aligned with their gender identity. And it leads to the presumption that everyone is that way, that one's gender is also consistent with their heterosexual orientation. People presume that if you identify as a woman, you would identify as heterosexual. If you identify as a man, you also identify as heterosexual. So non-heterosexual women and men are subjected to a lot of stereotypes, including the notion that lesbians want to be women, lesbians want to be men, and gay people want to be women. In reality, one's gender identity is also fairly complex. And for transgender, as a gender identity, this pertains to individuals with characteristics, behaviors, and self-identification and self-expression that's typically associated with the gender opposite of their biological sex. People also presume, all these stereotypes about trans individuals, like the notion that if one is transgender, they're also transsexual, meaning they've undergone gender confirmation surgery, or so others call it sex reassignment surgery, but the preferred term in the trans community is gender confirmation, because sex reassignment presumes or makes it sound like there was something wrong that had to be corrected or altered or fixed. And it also includes people who take hormonal treatment. And another stereotype that's often used also against trans individuals is that they cross-dress, meaning they wear clothing of the opposite gender. But for trans individuals, when identifying with the gender they identify with means they dress according to the gender that they identify with or that they embrace. So this is different from cross-dressing. And institutions or organizations that have policies against cross-dressing, quote unquote, end up perpetuating inequality and discrimination against the trans community. Okay, so I put here trans identity. So for transgender people, you have individuals with characteristics, behaviors, self-identification, and self-expression that's typically associated with a gender opposite of their biological sex. So you have, for example, MTF, or male to female, or trans women, and then also FTM, female to male or trans men. And for, as I said, transsexuals, these are people who've undergone gender confirmation surgery or taken hormonal treatments. Trans identity, like being transgender, is often presumed to be a sexual orientation, but in reality, transgender people are not always attracted to members whose gender is the opposite of the gender they identify with. I put here some examples of members of the trans community who are also involved with members of the same gender. So for example, Caitlyn Jenner is engaged to another woman. So you have a relationship between a trans woman and a cisgender woman. And then in the Philippines, this is Angie Meade King. She came out as a trans woman, I'm gonna say 5 years ago, and she and her spouse, Joey Meade, an actress in the Philippines. Angie is a professional, or was a professional car racer. When Angie came out as a trans woman, Joey is a cisgender woman, people presumed that Angie was gay. So the stereotype was, people didn't understand that Angie identified as a woman. They simply told Joey Meade, so your husband is gay. And Joey Meade's response was, my husband is not gay, my spouse is a woman. And they remain happily married and committed to each other. So it's, trans people can also be in, bisexual. They can identify as bisexual, like Caitlyn Jenner, and for Angie and Joey, they're in a committed relationship with another woman. So because people presume that if you identify as transgender, let's say one identifies as a trans woman, they would want to be with a man, or if one identifies as a trans man, they would want to be with a woman. And this leads to the perpetuation of heteronormativity, even in the trans community. Okay, and I put here some examples of discrimination against transgender people. In the Philippines, as well as in many other parts of the world, there are a lot of cases of discrimination against transgender people that are masked under policies against cross-dressing and policies regarding the use of the restroom, among others. In the Philippines, 5 years ago, Ms. Gretchen Diaz was arrested for using the women's restroom, and she was criminalized for it. People escorted her out of the building in handcuffs simply for using the women's restroom. And then in the legal system in the Philippines, as well as I would imagine in other countries also, there are cases of discrimination against transgender people in the legal system. So in the Philippines, for instance, Joseph Pemberton murdered his girlfriend, Jennifer Laude, and the reason he gave was it's because he did not know that she was transgender. And the court here actually used this as a mitigating circumstance to lower his sentence and give him lighter treatment. And over the past years, I think there was some negotiation about his early release. And then another form of discrimination against the trans community is dead naming. For example, using the birth name of a transgender individual, even if they've taken on another name that's more representative of their gender and their gender identity. So this functions as another form of gender discrimination and, transphobia, definitely. Okay. Another gender identity is what you would call non-binary gender identity, or NB for short. It pertains to a gender identity that's something other than being a woman or being a man or being neither male nor female. So this is both a gender identity and a catch-all term to describe gender identities other than those strictly pertaining to women and men. Sometimes people presume that non-binary people are automatically intersex, but in reality, non-binary people may be any sex category. They may be biologically male, female, intersex. So the bottom line here is that non-binary people don't limit their gender identity to their biological sex. And, while their preferred pronoun is they, it's not applicable to everyone. It's to be on the safe side, always best to ask people, or check with people how they want to be called or addressed, or what pronouns, they identify with. Okay, so yeah, here there's I just showed some pictures of people in who identify as neither who do not identify as exclusively a man or a woman. So you see here actually this on the top top left corner is someone from the intersex community. When they came out as intersex, they also then identified as a woman, but later on embraced their identity as a non-binary intersex person. And then the other photos are members of the entertainment industry who also later disclosed that they identified as non-binary. So, in this day and age, identifying as non-binary is also becoming increasingly visible, but also subjected to a lot of misunderstandings. And, it's also important to see that non-binary identity is actually not, it's nothing new, because in other cultures, we have had historically third gender categories. For example, I put here some examples across different cultures. In Afghanistan, you have the bacha posh. So these are girls dressed as boys, and they take on the cultural roles of boys. But, except for they're not allowed, or their culture does not embrace nor allow for lesbian, relationships. They simply take on the cultural responsibilities of boys. And then when they hit puberty, they're expected to take on the, or to transition back to womanhood. And the bacha posh are often found in families where you don't have sons, because Afghanistan is a very patriarchal society, and not having a son in the family, people are looked at differently, and the sons are also relied upon to help their parents with economic responsibilities because of the conservatism of Afghan society. And then sworn virgins in Albania pertain to women who take on men's traditional work and family roles, and they also dress as men. Although it doesn't mean that sworn virgins are automatically lesbians. It's simply the case that, in Albanian culture, it's very patriarchal. So a woman has to decide between if she marries, she prioritizes her husband's side of the family, or she can be a sworn virgin where she'll take on more leadership and family roles, but remain unmarried. And then in the Native American community, or in Canada, First Nation societies, this is actually an example of ethnic or indigenous communities that have always embraced being gay, being a lesbian, and so on. They use the term two-spirit that translates roughly to women, men, and they believe that if you identify as a lesbian or as gay and so on, your body houses both a feminine and a masculine spirit. So for gays and lesbians, being in the Native American and First Nations tribes, their being gay or being lesbian is actually not frowned upon. In fact, when they identify as two-spirit, it's celebrated in a ceremony, and afterwards they're free to be in a relationship with or marry a partner of their choice. So you have women, men who are biologically male, who take up women's work, dress up as women, have sexual relations with men, and you also have men, women who are biologically female, who live as men, take up men's work, fight in wars, and marry women. And then in India, right, the hijras or eunuchs are neither women nor men, are also and not necessarily seen as homosexuals, and they're distinguished by the absence of male genitalia, whether it's because of surgery on their own accord or ambiguous genitalia at birth. And then the Sanith in Oman pertain to cross-gender behaving people, people who are not men in the traditional sense. They are biologically male, effeminate, and they integrate both women's and men's traditional roles. So it actually shows that gender was historically and still is not in many societies associated or equated with biological sex or sexual identity. Okay, and then where sexual orientation comes into play, one of the disclaimers I put out here is we're using westernized categories to refer to sexual orientation, and other societies might have their own respective terms to refer to sexual orientation. So heterosexual means one is attracted to the opposite gender, and homosexual pertains to one who is attracted to the same gender, and this covers gays and lesbians. Being a homosexual is different from what you would call situational homosexuality, or people's involvement in relationships with the same gender or in environments where partners of the opposite gender are unavailable. So for example, in schools, in exclusive schools for girls and boys, there's actually more fluidity in terms of sexual orientation. But when people leave these environments, they go back to heterosexual relationships. This is different. Situational homosexuality is different from identifying as gay or lesbian, regardless of their environment. Bisexual pertains to someone who's attracted to both genders. And, in many societies, bisexuals also experience marginalization, not only as perpetuated by heterosexuals, but also even within the LGBTQ plus community. There's the notion, for example, that bisexuals cannot make up their minds, they're confused, they want the best of both worlds, or they're experimenting because they're in denial about their sexuality. And another stereotype is that bisexuals can't commit to a partner or one person only. But in reality, there are people who identify as bisexual and are happily committed regardless of the gender of the partner that they're involved with. They still identify as bisexual. And for people who identify as queer, it's an umbrella term for people who don't identify with binary identities in terms of gender. Like they don't necessarily identify as a woman or as a man, or sexual orientation. They don't necessarily identify as heterosexual or gay or lesbian. So this is also used as an umbrella category for non-heterosexual people and for people who don't identify with gender binaries. A term that's often used right now interchangeably with queer is, as mentioned a while ago, pansexual. So people who have, for example, sexual and emotional attractions to members of any sex or gender, including those who do not strictly identify as female or male, or even those who don't necessarily identify as cisgender. So, pansexual it's a term that encompasses a lot of fluidity with regard to gender and sexuality. And another orientation actually is questioning, which sometimes people don't take seriously. Questioning, as the term suggests, pertains to one who is questioning and exploring their sexuality. It doesn't mean that they're confused or that they're in denial. It just simply means they're determining what their sexuality is. And, this is also perfectly fine and healthy to be questioning one's sexuality. And then finally, another orientation is asexual, pertaining to people who experience no sexual attraction. And asexuals also experience stereotyping. For instance, one stereotype is that they're repressed in terms of their sexuality. In reality, asexuals are not repressed, nor are they homosexuals, gays or lesbians in the closet. They're simply not attracted to any gender. And another stereotype is that if one is celibate, they're automatically asexual. In reality, celibate people are of any orientation. It doesn't mean that if they're celibate, they're automatically asexual. Okay. I was going to mention one of the scientific studies about the social construction of gender and sexuality is actually the Kinsey reports that came out in the 1940s. So as early as then, the Kinsey reports highlighted how sexuality is fluid, meaning it's a continuum. And definitely, you can see political implications if and when people see sexuality as something that's a continuum rather than something fixed. What the Kinsey reports found out, the two-part series discovered that for people who identify as either exclusively heterosexual or as exclusively homosexual, at the time the study was conducted, their history actually revealed that, not everyone who identified as heterosexual was only involved with a partner of the opposite gender, and not everyone who identified as homosexual was only involved with a partner of the same gender. There was actually a lot of fluidity. For example, people who were in heterosexual relationships had also previously been in relationships with members of the same gender, or in other cases, people who were in relationships with the same gender had also previously gotten involved with members of the opposite gender before coming out as gay, lesbian, and so on. And there's also, for others, some got involved with a member of, for example, those who identified as heterosexual. There were those who had gotten involved with members of the same gender, but after they broke up, they went back to being with a partner of the opposite gender. And for others who identified as gay or lesbian, they had maybe relationships with members of the same gender, but the opposite gender, but later on went back to a relationship with someone of the same gender. So in reality, the 7-point scale of Kinsey shows that people are actually more bisexual than, they care to admit. And it just really shows the fluidity of sexuality. I would say, however, because the study, of course, the Kinsey scale is dated, it excludes other gender identities and other sexual orientation. So trans people, where would they fit in? Non-binary people, asexual people are not included for the most part in the 7-point scale of Kinsey. But in any case, this scale also highlights how sexual orientation is definitely different from gender identity. One can identify as gay, lesbian, and so on, whether or not they're cisgender, non-binary, transgender and the like. And one can, let's say, one can also identify as transgender and be of any sexual orientation. And another important thing to highlight is that the categories we use surrounding sexual orientation and gender identity are also rooted in the culture. Okay, so over the late 20th and early 21st century, we've seen an increased awareness of LGBTQIA++ rights. And this also includes increasing awareness of transgender issues and the issues of intersex people, alongside the issues of lesbians, gays, bisexual people, and queer people, and even asexuals. There's also growing recognition of non-binary people, including third genders or third gender categories, whether it's in Native American culture, Mexican culture, Afghan culture, Indian culture, and the like, gender blenders, and gender variant people. So there's growing recognition of gender non-conforming individuals, and then also a greater appreciation of what's called queer theory, which highlights gender as a social construct. It's reinforced according to the social and cultural norms that people attach to gender roles and even sexual orientation. But at the same time, queer theory highlights how gender is actually something that we perform in our everyday interactions rather than it being fixed. But on the downside, we also have ongoing gender-based violence as revealed in attacks and murders of LGBTQ++ people. And this also coincides with the attacks and murders of their advocates, including feminists, and then also minorities, especially those who are gender minorities and minorities based on race, ethnicity, and religion, and low income or poor people. So just to close, I wanted to share, in promoting a gender-inclusive society, the International Bill of Gender Rights highlights the need to express human and civil rights from a gender perspective. This doesn't mean only the inclusion of special rights for people with a particular gender identity or gender role concerns, but rather it covers universal rights to be claimed and exercised by every human being, including the right to define one's own gender identity, regardless of their chromosomal sex, genitalia, assigned birth sex, and so on, protection from discrimination in access to space or participation in activities by virtue of their gender identity. And finally, protection from wrongful psychiatric diagnosis or treatment, like the prejudgment as disordered, quote unquote, simply to undergo gender confirmation surgery or to be cleared in order to take hormonal treatments. So, because it's very problematic when members of the trans community, as they would often say, like they have to be diagnosed as having something wrong with them just so they can be given permission to undergo surgery to be the gender they identify with, or to take hormones in order to express their authentic selves as members of the gender they identify with. So that's it for me. So like these are just some examples of a pride march I attended in Canada a long time ago, and this shows different sexual orientations and gender identities, also including allies who are one in promoting a society that's more inclusive and welcoming of all people regardless of their sexual orientation and gender identity. And it's hoped that throughout the world, and even in religious settings, we can make these circles safe spaces where people will not feel alienated or afraid to come out and speak their truth regardless of their sexual orientation and gender identity. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Diana. Thank you so much. I think all of us have learned something. Many of us who felt we knew everything, I think have still learned something. Most important, I think the takeaway is we have to realize the fluidity of gender, that there is a spectrum, that biological sex is not to be used to put people into boxes. That is the biggest problem we have. And, we have to put the people in the boxes of male, female. This is what you have to do. Of course, in feminist language, we call it stereotyping. And, just because we say in the gospel, we are told that God made humans as male and female. So that is it. That's what we believe. That's what it has to be. So let's not put people into boxes. I was very struck by your description of the First Nation people when they call it two-spirit. And I was saying, these are people who have not done research. They have just, kind of learned from the experience of loving one another in their community that, okay, this person seems to have two spirits, male and female. Let us accept them. I mean, it's so fantastic. It's so fantastic. Thank you so much. So I think our take home is just respect people as they are. Respect people's decision to be who they feel they are meant to be. And not to be eager to put people into boxes. And I say the Catholic Church loves to put us into boxes. And if they cannot put us into boxes, they call us sinners. So please, please do not do that. Just love people as they are. Thank you, Diana, so much. And I'm sure there are questions.
If anybody would have a personal experience that they would like to share, we could be open to that also.
Can I share something? I just want to, it's not a question, it's just feeling deeply grateful for organizing this encounter, because I felt so much with each story, and it's so beautiful to see this as a process of our own evolution. When Rachel was sharing about moving out of homophobic experience, I really felt for me also it took time to grow beyond a judgmental and it's so freeing, because I really feel part of the human family, which is so fluid. So really thank you, because I can make this commitment with greater assertion. And today I got a tag to identify. Thanks, Diana. NB. I didn't know how to call myself because I knew I didn't fit into the gender binary, but I didn't know how to say who I am. No? So we are really together on the journey with each one of you, and really grateful to each one of you who shared your personal stories.
Thank you, Chechi. We have a few hands raised up, so we'll go in the order that you asked. Reina, please go ahead with your question or comment.
No question, just a comment. Thank you for sharing, all of you. And Rachel, for sharing how we have journeyed, all of us, from being confused people to having clarity. And I think there's just a conditioning that gave us all the biases, but we were prepared to shake that. And another thing is, I'm in Pune, and Eva spoke about how she was, she's from Pune, and there's no support group there. I'm open to start a support group, okay? So if you all have contacts in Pune that you want to get in touch with me, please feel free and we can work out something.
Definitely.
That's so awesome. I'd like to just mention something, I didn't start out from a place of confusion. I started out from a place of judgment. So I still have to, I take every opportunity to apologize to LGBT persons. Then I was confused, and then I've come here to this stage, and I don't know where else I'm going to grow. So I hope the journey continues. Maria, you raised your hand next, so please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Well, first of all, I'm from Argentina. I'm in Latin America. So, well, I'm very happy to be here with you and to be able to share a conversation in English where, well, I know it may not be your first language and it's not mine either. So, well, I am really happy and I have been really moved with your stories. I love them all. And well, about my situation here in Córdoba, Argentina. Well, here we don't have an LGBTQ minister, and if there is one, it's not visible enough, right? So, well, some years ago, I felt that God was calling me to practice this minister, to work on this. At least here where I am, I belong to a movement, to a Catholic movement here, where it's not that welcoming with LGBTQ plus people, right? So I'm a lesbian, right? So when I found out that when lesbians or gays or when they wanted to be in a relationship, to have a girlfriend or boyfriend, they were like invited to be on a process, to a special process. It's not like a conversion therapy, but it has the same objective. So it's like not that good. And well, I thought that, well, it should not be happening anymore, especially because this movement is especially oriented to young people. So young people, they are already knowing this. They don't need to deconstruct. They don't need to learn as much as maybe older people need, right? So, well, there I received the calling from God to work on this, on the LGBTQ ministry here. And well, I'm really happy to see that in India that there are a lot of people who are working on this already. And my question is, how can I start? I mean, I already started like learning, participating in conversations, participating in some workshops, talking to a lot of people, a lot of allies. But my question is, how can I start like in my movement? I don't mean to work on the ministry, on the LGBTQ ministry in the whole Catholic Church in Córdoba, but at least in my movement, in the group I belong. So, well, what are your suggestions to start here?
That's a very difficult question. I'll ask Daira if you have some suggestions, and then we can have other experts speak up.
You were gonna say like so yeah, thank you for people for those who raised their insights and then also questions, suggestions about what do you mean?
Maria would like suggestions on how she can start a movement in Argentina.
Oh, okay. Well, I was going to say it. I mean, if it's like, are you looking at something religious or secular? Because that can be like, I mean, to your point, it can be really very like it can be very problematic when like religious spaces, including the Catholic Church, can be very selective about like how they look at issues relating to sexual orientation and gender identity. But one thing that I would also share is like especially in today's society, there's also increased not only awareness but also openness about the fluidity of one's sexual orientation and gender identity. So maybe like start small, start at the grassroots, look for like-minded individuals, and also be prepared. Because I remember my own experience in when I lived in Chicago for as a graduate student. At that time, there wasn't even the acronym yet LGBT, just those who identified as gay and lesbian. And the Archdiocese of Chicago, however, to its credit, it designated a certain parish to have to organize masses actually for members of what they then called the gay and lesbian community. And then I think other smaller churches did that, and they were prepared. They did their own fundraising because they knew the institutional church would not support them. But like regardless of whether you take a religious or secular approach, always assuring people they're not alone. Like they're in a safe space, where no one is judging them nor condemning them or seeking to change them in terms of sexual orientation or their gender identity. Always start with that. And also just assuring people that it's okay if you don't have the answers yet, it will come. And not only that, like if you're not yet sure, enjoy the process, enjoy the ride, so to speak. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, yes, definitely. I'm not trying to create a specific movement. I'm just trying to become my movement welcoming to the LGBTQ community. And well, as it was created like 4 years ago, the main leaders, are older and they're more conservative. So well, the young people in the group are trying to create, so not create, but well, to work on this, to talk about LGBTQ issues and all that. And well, it's a controversial issue this year. So well, we are trying. I am trying. I'm writing a project, and my sources are your experiences. Well, every other workshop I'm attending, but well, I'm still in the process of like writing the project and then talking to the main leaders about this, because it's an important issue and it's something that God is trying to move now in this time.
Maria, I'll just share with you what we did here in India. Okay, now if you look at me, I am 74 years old and I started the group over here in India. Okay, all I did was get together people who are interested. I didn't have a project. We don't have any budget. Okay, we just got together people because I realized that there are people in our community, in our Catholic community, who are marginalized, who are LGBTQI, who are marginalized. So I just created a space where they could come and they could talk. Okay. And now, of course, thanks to technology, we can use WhatsApp. So we have a WhatsApp group. We can use Zoom, where we have interactive meetings, you see? And that's the way. We have no funds at all. And I'm telling you, we have a vibrant group. And this is the group that has created this event today. No funds, let me tell you that. And no permission from our cardinal, no permission. We know that he's okay, but you don't need the permission. Please remember, all of us are baptized as priest, prophet, and leader. So if you feel God's Spirit is telling you to do something, please go ahead and do it. And just trust that God will guide you. The important thing is you must have the desire and you must believe that God is guiding you, and go ahead and do it. Find people, announce to people. Now, Rachel and I have partnered in getting this, and we got everybody else together. Rachel does the IT work, that is the website and the other things. Now Andy joined us, and Andy is also with her, handling all the communications. So that's all you need. That's all you need. Okay. And people can pitch in. So don't worry. If God is telling you something, just go ahead and do it. Don't wait for money to come in and all. It might never happen. Okay. Just find people and do it. Create the space. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's really encouraging for me.
And with a surname like yours, we're quite, you have stories in your own country, which are very inspiring. I'll go on to the next person who has raised their hand, Anita, followed by Aloysius. Anita, please go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you. Really nice listening to everyone. And maybe I'll start with responding to Maria a little bit and then going to a quick reflection on my part. Maria, I've been working within human rights and social campaigns for the last 30 years. The first 10 years was largely with indigenous people, with right to information, with Dalit young women and things like that, with very little exposure to sexual minority issues and sexual orientation. It was much later, like 20 years back, that I started becoming friends with many people who had started asserting their rights in Bangalore. We're exploring these spaces in colleges through NGOs and campaigns. And in that space, actually, a lot of vulnerable people from different groups, like labor unions, the domestic workers, and the LGBT youth, and the working class within the LGBT, actually found solidarity in supporting each other's struggles. And in protesting together is where we found friends and built friendships. Protesting together whenever a crisis came, when you were all standing with candles protesting for something, and people came together and just got to know people who are standing left and right to you. So some of those small youth groups and activist groups have now started community-led NGOs. There is a lot of institutional funding for LGBTQ groups and for especially young people like you. So if you want to get in touch with that, I know only the secular space when it comes to these issues. I haven't worked within the church. In fact, my journey in the first 10 years with groups which were progressive and looking at feminist issues and inclusion actually distanced me mentally, spiritually from the church quite a bit. And my coming back, I think, is largely over the last 5-6 years, seeing progressive women like Kochu, Virginia, Rena, and all of them looking at taking up issues of sexual harassment within the church, taking up issues of inclusion within the church. So like Rena said, there's space for support in Pune. I would like volunteer my house, which we call Open Space, for a safe space for people who would like to come, just have a conversation, have a cup of tea, or just sit quietly without being asked any questions for some time. Anything is like, it depends on how you'd like to use it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anita. Thank you so much. We'll move to Aloysius.
Okay, hi. I am Aloysius. I am a seminarian. I'm studying for being a priest. I'm in my final years of formation. Maybe by God's grace, I might be a priest in the coming 2 years, probably. So I'm here because of maybe Andy and Sister Prema is here. So I came in contact with RCI as part of my research. As any bachelor's or any degree course, we have to submit a thesis, a dissertation kind of thing. So I did my master's in sociology. So since then, gender, sexuality, these were things that I kind of, got attracted to. And when I got into theology, I wanted somehow, collaborate these two subjects that I like. And then hence came the topic of LGBTQ and their pastoral care. So my research is on the pastoral care of LGBTQ community in India. Uh, so, uh, uh, so my experience as such uh, has been difficult in the sense to, to get. I wanted to add in because my general motive or the general idea of the research was to inculcate or to include the voice of LGBT community, because the standpoint of the church and their views has been very is out there. We know what the church teaches, and many people have done that. So I wanted to look on the teachings of the church through the lens of the LGBT people. So that's how I came in touch with the RCI. So this is my journey and my introduction as such. Few questions to, and first of all, thank you for this enlightened session, because when I was doing my research, I have lack of availability of phone, because we're in seminary, we get only phones on Saturdays evening and Sunday. This Andy told me about this session, so I took a special permission to attend this meeting. So I got the phone in the afternoon, and then I was like, oh my God, will I miss the meeting? Will I miss the meeting? But luckily, I got the meeting, and Andy shared with me the link, and I got registered. So a few points that I would first of all thank you for the wonderful session. It was very touching, because within the last two months, I've been trying to get in touch with the LGBTQ people, but I have not got much response. And that is also through mail, because of lack of availability of phone. That's through mail. So putting it in words and hearing it, both are two different experiences. That's what I learned today. When I got a few responses from the mail, I read it. Okay, fine. I could relate a bit. But then today, when I heard those experiences, it was very touching. So thank you, all of you, Lyle, Eva, Andy, all of you. Few clarifications, first of all, that I would like to ask Diane is regarding sexual orientation and sexual behavior. That's the first thing. Second thing is regarding transgender and transsexual. Is the only difference between them is regarding gender confirmation surgery? Is that the only difference that is between transgender and transsexual? And then, yeah, these are two questions regarding to Diane. And then I also got to know we have Surain, who doesn't like to be called as father, so I'll call him Surain. So you have been in the church, you have been a part of the church. So I'm aspiring to be a part of the church or the part of the clergy. So as a young brother of yours, means as I do, and I try to, get some insight on the pastoral care. How do you manage, when we all heard that churches has many standpoints and try, and as Virginia said, likes to put in boxes, but then we on the part of the church, without going against the church, how do you, balance these two, things? Because you being of the part of the church, but then still not going against the church. So these are two things. Well, first, Diane, I guess I'm clear. I'm not sure. I'm very nervous. So I trying to make it slow. So these are two questions that I have. First is to Diana and second to Suren.
Thank you for that question. To answer your question, yes, transgender is an umbrella category, and transsexuals pertain to people who've undergone or who are in transitioning or in the process of transitioning to undergo gender confirmation surgery or taking hormonal treatment. So, but the umbrella category is transgender. So not all transgender people are transsexuals, but all transsexuals are part of the transgender community. So I hope that clarifies your question.
There was another question regarding sexual orientation and sexual behavior.
The difference between it, like, well, your sexual behavior is whether you act on your sexual orientation or otherwise. So, for example, me, I identify as bisexual, but it doesn't mean, what I mean, like, I'm not always in a relationship. So you get what I'm saying here. Whether I identify as, it doesn't mean I'm less bisexual when I'm not in a relationship. It just means, what I do in terms of acting on my sexuality or otherwise. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't mean I mean, you see what I'm saying here. Like, my orientation is my orientation, regardless of whether or not I'm involved in any sexual behavior or otherwise. I hope that answers your question.
I think we move to Suren for the next part of the question. Pastoral support to LGBTQ persons.
So, Aloysius, one of the questions you asked is, how do I manage to do and say what I do while not going against church teaching or going against the church? I think one of the fundamental reasons why I am what I am is because I feel that you have to sometimes go against the church. Being part of an institution would include challenging that institution. It is not possible to adhere to all the teachings of the institution if some of those teachings are either unjust or manifestly out of date. So that's one of the things I would like to say right at the start. At times, I am in conflict with the church, and I have faced the consequences of that, and it has brought me great joy when the conflict comes, because it means that you're standing for something that is bigger than just a law or a dogma. So that's something that you should never really fear. The second thing is that for me, I think I was brought up by a very, very brilliant set of parents who taught me never to have prejudice against anybody. So my leanings towards feminism, towards activism, social issues has come from my childhood, and it has matured over the years. I think when I joined Satya as a young seminarian, that was when I got more enlightened into things like women's rights and all that. And thanks to my friend Vanessa, who's sitting over here with me, got introduced to the Pride March, to the LGBT community, and to a lot of activities that enabled me to understand that many of the teachings of the church are not necessarily just. We need to remember, I think Rachel covered this in her presentation, we need to remember that scripture is dated. It has a context. And if we are going to apply a contextual teaching for all eternity, we're doing no justice to human beings, and we're doing no justice to the teaching either. Every teaching has a context, and so nothing can be eternal, except perhaps God, if you would like to believe in God. So the point is that how do we search for meaning and truth in every generation? Today, the issue of LGBT rights is an issue of great concern. Why? Because they've been facing persecution for generations because of unjust teachings, and we are becoming much more aware. My role in the church is to make myself available both through speech. So when my sermons are given, for example, I paint my nails, I go for pride marches. When I'm profiled, I get questions from my bishop, and I'm okay with that. Okay, I'm okay with people asking me questions on why I paint my nails. I exhibit them during my sermons. It becomes a conversation point. I'm not saying I do it to challenge people. It becomes a conversation point. Sometimes from a conversation point, I have created sessions. I have offered people the opportunity to enlighten themselves, and we have moved on from there. So I think somebody had used the word baby steps earlier in the presentation. We all take baby steps. Creating listening spaces within the church is one of the most important things we need to do. I have had so many experiences and have shared those experiences of people coming to me and coming out to me. And for some reason, simply because I have presented myself as someone who's ready to listen, people have felt more empowered to come out to me than even to their own parents. When I can guide them, the first thing is to make them realize that they're perfectly wonderful just the way they are. Some of them have had traumatic experiences from family. Some have had traumatic experiences from the church, to make them realize that they are accepted, they're loved, and they're wonderful just the way they are. If you can create those listening spaces, I think that's the greatest thing we can do in the church. I can't do much with the Pope and the Cardinals and the Curia. I don't even have a passport, so I can't even go there with a bomb. What I can do is, wherever I am, make sure that people know that I am in favor of rights for all without prejudice. Do it with a smile, do it with love, do it with acceptance. And I think that's beautiful. Any other questions? I'm ready to answer.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Suren, Diana, both of you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Suren. I think Philu raised her hand. Philu, are you around here? Yeah.
I'm there. No, this is just a small baby experience which I would like to share.
Yes,
I've been taking for many years educational program for young people, and invariably this is one of the topic which is uppermost in their mind: what is lesbian, what is gay. And invariably, some people will come and share the experimentation they have done, which, in Aloysius language, we would say sexual activity, which doesn't actually mean they are gay or they are lesbian or whatever. They are just exploring their sexuality. So they might have done this or they might have done that. And very often it is because, as one of you said, they are in a context where they don't meet the person the opposite sex. So it's important to listen to them in non-judgmental manner so that, they get courage to explore themselves, understand themselves much more, and not feel the guilt and not begin to label themselves. And who knows, they may begin to open up also to other adults, their parents and others. So the adults being non-judgmental, as this was a word used, when young people come and begin to share, is so very important to begin to accompany them in their journey, whatever it is. And I've had quite few people even later on continue to share with me these type of stories, adults, women, and sometimes I've come across men because I was in the Women's Commission, and there have been cases where violent marriages and all that. Then you go back and then you see this person wasn't really heterosexual and got into marriage by force and things like that. So listening to people in a non-judgmental manner, wherever it is so important. I like so much what Eva said, nobody can take away from you the right to say you are created in God's image and likeness. And that is the basis of our humanity. So I think having that compassionate heart when we listen to people, as Surin also was saying, is important because we just do not know. Each of us are also do not know just because of our one biological sex. We do not know actually what are we. We are just learning about ourselves. Each of us have a certain amount of a range of masculinity and femininity in each of us. Nobody has got a fully feminine body or fully masculine body. It's sort of mixed because hormones themselves are mixed. So to force ourselves to become completely masculine, completely feminine would be doing injustice or doing violence to our own being. So I think we should be compassionate with our own self, and that will help us to be non-judgmental, compassionate with others too. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fidu. We're open to more questions, but I think we've covered so many areas. There don't seem to be more questions. I had one though. Is it possible for a person who calls themselves as heterosexual to be truly 100% sexual or heterosexual? Because as Philo said, we have a little bit of masculinity and femininity in each of us. Do we also have a little bit of a homosexual in each person who claimed to be heterosexual? The latent bisexuality or alternative sexuality in each of us? Question to Diana, please. Yeah.
I think so, with like the Kinsey scale highlighting how sexuality is fluid, I think there are times when we feel more attracted towards the same gender or the opposite gender. So I think like if we stop labeling ourselves, that's the thing, because I've seen this also. Actually, my own experience, because I experienced attraction towards the opposite gender and then the same gender, and then I got all confused and I thought it wasn't possible to be bisexual. So for a time, I identified as a lesbian, but even when I identified as a lesbian, I would get attracted to guys sometimes. And then, eventually I just realized, I think we're all bisexual in one way or another, but we're just pressured to identify with one orientation. And maybe it's part of our socialization, the labeling or putting people in boxes. But I think it's also very free. We recognize that, it's possible to, be, it's possible to be more fluid in terms of sexual orientation and to have like latent bisexuality. Definitely, like I wouldn't discount that. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, it does answer my question. We have a question from Linda. Linda, please go ahead.
I'm Linda. I work as a psychologist and a teacher, and my question is to Suren. I have a lot of issues with parents more than people coming out, and I feel it's really sad. First of all, the person has a difficulty coming out, and much of the complication is, parents will come and say, we can do anything, but, you have to convert or change. I'm asking Suren as a priest. I very rarely meet a priest who would be able to talk to a parent. And believe me, the church is very powerful, how much ever we discount it. So more than a psychologist, if I can, at least say that Suren would probably talk to them, it would really help. I'm really asking both as a teacher and a psychologist. So I have lots of young people who say, and their parents are really traumatizing them to a large extent, to the point of like it's difficult for that person. Sometimes they're locked up and it's quite difficult. And I think that maybe as a priest, I don't know how much of education regarding LGBT happens in the seminary, but if I see Suren, I've seen him at different gatherings also. And I'm asking, like, are you open to dealing with parents?
Linda, I have had some experience of speaking with parents and almost died in the process. But I guess it depends on the way in which the dialogue goes, because some of the people who have come out to me are so fearful of speaking to their parents that I myself would hesitate, because I guess their fear is well founded in a reality that they understand. So if I were to go and speak to the parents, if they are not capable, if the person speaking to me is not capable of conquering that fear, I would be very hesitant, for the simple reason the person might get even more persecuted after I speak. So what I have been doing over the years, Rachel knows this, and so does Virginia. What I've been doing over the years is to make this a part of my conversation, especially in sermons, to create at least the possibility that accepting a child who is of a different sexual orientation or gender identity is good, is wonderful. And then I get some people coming afterwards and asking me, of course, some people are straight outright rude and say, "Are you gay? That's why you're in favor of gays." And I said, my sexual orientation makes no difference, because I'm supposed to be celibate. So I mean, it doesn't make a difference whether I'm gay or not gay. But if there is someone who is, if there are parents who are in doubt, yes, I am ready to speak to them. I have spoken to some parents, a few parents, very few parents really, I can tell you that. And I have spoken, and with a very, very small minority, I'm happy to say that at least they believe that their minds were opened. When I was in Kalyan, I conducted a session. I had been approached by a couple with two small kids, and they enjoyed my presentation so much during my sermon that they asked for a session in their small community. And I had about 35 to 40 people over there. The youngest was a 6-year-old child. The oldest was a grandmother of 75. And the session went very beautifully. It was a little bit like what Diana presented, but very much simpler, which is why I won Diana's presentation. It was so brilliant. And at the end, many of the parents felt that they had learned something which had been kept from them for long. And I felt happy for that, because I believe that if we start just putting thoughts into parents' minds, at least at some stage, they might be able to accept that their child could be different, with more compassion than before. So if it's a one-on-one, I'm ready, and I've already told this to Virginia. I'm ready to bless people. I'm ready to talk to people, talk to parents, and yeah, I've signed up for the New Ways Ministry blessing of same-sex couples. I'm ready for all this. Yeah, I don't know whether I've answered your question thoroughly, but
yes, you have, Suren. I won't send you the ones who are not willing. Sometimes they say, "Can you tell me, is there a priest?" Sometimes they need that kind of. You could say go ahead. Sometimes they're okay to accept, but it's the community, but they want someone to kind of validate what they feel, and they would not want a psychologist, but they would want a priest. In those cases, I've dealt with several difficult cases, and I'm not going to just parcel them. I'm only saying that if there is a call, like they would want a priest, I should know whom to send them to, because we don't want to add to the trouble that already they have. So it does answer my question. Thank you so much.
I will be providing, some people have asked me for my email ID, so I will provide it on the chat group over here.
All right. Thank you, Suren.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Linda and Suren. We have a question from Jerry, followed by Andy. So Jerry, please go ahead.
Hi, this is Jerry. I'm a Father Jerry, and from the Redemptorist. I've been attending a lot of sessions on LGBTQ and plus, because I had many friends from school who identify themselves in this line. As a priest, I've always, as a Redemptorist, we always say we are for the most abandoned and the poor of society. And along with that thing, which I was always pursuing, to be with the poor and the marginalized, I also felt that there is a need right now in our current scenario to read the signs of the time and to journey along with people who need us. They might be anyone. So as a seminarian, I felt that I had to make a choice whether to, to become a brother, to become a priest, and living in a a mixed society of different people from different religions, it was a tough choice to be made as an elder son, because they thought that I would work and support my family. And to make that choice was difficult because I was surrounded. I lived in a very non-Catholic kind of environment. But when I made that choice, I had to make that choice. There was no other go. But so many people told me, don't make it, don't make it. And I had to make that choice. And I feel that each person has a choice to make, because that drive is so strong within it. We can't ignore it, or the person will be unhappy. And so, well, the question comes about LGBTQI. I feel that that's a drive in them. And if I could just be there, somebody was with me to guide me when I was going through this decision to make in my life. I felt that as a priest, I could be a friend, not a priest, but a friend or a companion who's just there to listen, not to make judgments. Though I'm a Catholic priest, I have my own standpoints. But in friendship also, there are friends who don't adhere to what I say or to what the church says. But I don't break friends with them, or I don't push them away. But I'm friends to them. So it's my desire, after attending so many sessions, that somehow, to be an instrument, a small little instrument wherever I am, to say that yes, I could be a companion, I could be a friend, and there are people who can journey along with me. I've also thought about the church has something called as SCCs, small Christian communities, and PCCs. I think as a group which I'm attending again and again, but I have not found any group which I have hold on to, so that this is a small group where I can log on to myself. Like, okay, I'm here, Jerry. I'm a priest too, but I'm also a human being. I can't ignore that fact. And I would be open to discussions, to journey along, as someone asked just now, that Father Suren, would you like to talk? Yes, I would be ready to talk to whatever. I will not make judgments, but with whatever knowledge I have, I think I can share it with you. The decision is up to the person, whoever wants to discuss or talk or share, because I feel Jesus just accepted anyone and everyone. He did not make any distinctions. Yes, he had certain strong points, but at the end of the day, it was the human being which was important. So I thank the group for having this discussion, and I'm happy to see Lyle, because as a brother, I've had contact with him. And Virginia Saldana, Dr. Virginia, I think I approached her for my studies when I was doing my thesis on something, and I mailed her, and she sent some documents to me. So I was so happy to see them and hear them for the first time. I'm in a session with them. So it's a great pleasure for me and great learning. And thank you, Rachel, and thank you all of you all, and especially Diana for her excellent and well presented document. I feel that is very good to study and to talk sometimes in circles where they need certain information. But when I deal with such people, I think more than the statistics and knowledge, it's the heart and the friendship that is what is important. Other things just fall in place. So thank you once again.
Thank you so much, Jerry.
Doctor. I'm not doctor.
Okay.
I don't have a doctorate in anything. It's just my interest in all these things that, I have read up. Thank you.
So thank you so much. That has been very encouraging to hear more and more people willing to support the community. We have a question from Andy, and then or a comment, and then followed by Roy. Andy, go ahead.
Hi, so it's going to be from me.
Sorry, Roshan, go ahead.
Yeah. So hi, I'm Roshan. I'm from Goa, and I'm doing my master's in literature. So I actually wanted to briefly respond to your question. Am I audible? Is it faint?
Yes. Yes. Very audible.
Yeah. Rachel, your question, I think it's largely the society and the politics that makes these markers, these identity markers, like heterosexuals or homosexuals or whatever, right? And people are put in the boxes so that politically and socially everyone is definable, and you can sort of understand how society works then. But you do not have to comply to these markers at all. So you have the rights to sort of explore your sexuality and understand your desires. But oftentimes it is difficult because we live in a society that also likes to put people in boxes, like I said. And second thing that I want to say, what helps me, sort of battle through as a queer person of faith is that I like to have knowledge about the Bible. I like to have knowledge about the teachings of the Lord, because then no one can come up to me and say that, so and so passage says so and so, and hence whatever you're doing, your desires are not true. So I would like if every one of us, takes some time to sort of understand all these conventional passages that are used to sort of threaten us, and to sort of knock those passages on their head by sort of interpreting them the way it suits your context. So that is something that has helped me greatly.
Thank you so much, Roshan. I agree with you that these boxes are made not just to define us easily, but I think it's also a way that we are controlled. It's an easier way to control a population when you divide them into hetero, bi, whatever, and so on. So breaking those bondages is in itself a powerful expression. And as Christian, I think Jesus broke a lot of bondages that way too. We'll go ahead to Roy. Roy, please go ahead.
Hello, good evening, everybody. I'm Roy, Father Roy, as many of you know me. And I have really hats off to all of you for organizing this, and to all the speakers, truly, Lyle, Eva, and of course, from Diana from Philippines. Just to share something that, the All India Catholic University Federation, that is ICUF, is a body within India which has been working with the youth. And I was the state animator for many years. So about 3 years back, when we were at St. Xavier's College, the whole theme for ICUF was gender. And since then, ICUF as a group has been working for gender issues. And we at St. Xavier's College had invited people from the NAS Foundation to come and speak. And down the years, we've had a number of small events, not cataclysmic events, but definitely ICUF is one group that I think has been pushing this point of injustice onwards. Lyle has been very much a member of ICUF, and of course, I know that both Virginia's daughters were in college when I was there, and so I think what really brought happiness to this movement, of course, seeing Father Suren and Jerry and Aloysius and so many seminarians and priests also here and joining in this this movement. So I think we are getting to the stage where we have a more and more support coming from clergy, as well as from all people who are really human rights activists who are fighting for this cause and fighting to make right an unjust issue which has been part of the church for so many years. I'm truly grateful to Lyle, especially for inviting me here, and of course, Virginia I've known for many, many years. But to all of you for taking this stand, and I do hope that we can continue to support you and carry on this this movement. My subject is neuroscience, and I'm very happy to share the neuroscientific point of view on gender and how the fluidity of gender is so much a part of neuroscience research today. Thank you.
That is so amazing. We're finding so many connections here in this meeting, quite unexpected. Thank you so much, Roy, for your support, and to all of you who have offered to support groups in the future. I personally believe, and so does RCI, is one of the major reasons that there is not enough support is also because knowledge is lacking. Creating awareness, creating opportunities like this where we can talk. I do not know how many members here, many have not spoken yet, but we are all learning from each other. And hopefully more of this sharing will create more awareness and more people standing up for the rights of each other. With that, I think we will, it's already 8:15 here. So if there are no more questions, I'll hand over to Virginia.
I would ask Rachel to give our social media information to people, please. We have a website. So Rachel can put it on the chat. We have a Twitter account. We have a Instagram account, and we have a Facebook page. So if you want to contact us, please use any of these social media platforms, and you can contact us. We are very grateful that everybody has joined this today. Of course, 66 registered, but only 37 turned up. But whatever it is, I think we made a step for creating awareness, and this is what is important. Like Linda was sharing, and Linda has shared with me in the past also many times. She has had a lot of, sort of grief with the parents, having, not accepting. And we wanted more parents, more teachers, because I realized a lot of children come out to their teachers, or teachers can see when children are in school. And I have had some LGBT sharing with me that they suffered in school, So teachers, parents, I think we will have more and more of these programs to reach more people so that we can create greater support in the community. And we hope that one day that the church will accept its mistake in marginalizing this community. In fact, we hope that wherever you are, you can also make an effort to participate in this wonderful synod on synodality, which is happening in all dioceses all over the world, supposed to be starting this month, next month in October. Make an effort to put your voice through, or let us make a noise on our social media platforms. So, or using Twitter, using Instagram, get our voices heard so that the church will have to be forced to change. We need more and more voices. Thank you very much. I won't keep you any longer. You've got contacts. Please contact us. Contact any one of the group through whom you came here. And let us continue supporting and widening this community of support. Good night, everybody. Good day to those of you who are in the West. And bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for attending and for all your comments and questions. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.